Where them Catholics at? Yeah. Yo, where them Catholics at? Man, what's the matter with these bishops?
Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's the Catholic Convert Show. As usual, I'm sitting over here in wonderful South Carolina, and Ed is trapped in the terrible state of New Jersey. But, you know, he's doing the best he can, and our prayers are with him.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Now, I haven't been able to get the bumper stickers that you told me about out of my head. Right. You said it's proud to be a piney from my head to my hiney.
Yeah,
y'all need to stop this.
What? It's good stuff. It's here somewhere.
Oh, look, there it is. Of all of the things to just keep readily available, a bumper sticker is pretty low on my list. But okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
sure.
You can always keep this with you. Slides from the Vatican from like 50 years ago. Color slides. They're very cool. It opens up and look, slides.
Oh, nice.
So you got to keep all that stuff at the ready because you don't know when it's going to come up that you're going to. What if somebody walks in right now and says, "Hey, dude, can I borrow your 1956 Vatican color slides?" Say, "Sure, here they are. You're good to go."
Yeah, you have to keep those readily available.
Of course.
I see that now. Oh man. Tell you what, yesterday went pretty good as far as the wife's birthday goes.
Very nice.
It was uneventful. We didn't even have to leave the house because my wife was like, every year I try to take her out to a nice restaurant and the kids stay home, teenagers take care of the little ones, and we just do our thing as husband and wife. But we've been going out so much just errand wise. We're like, you know what? We just don't even want to leave the house because whether it was trying to get everybody back and forth to vacation Bible school or me running back and forth to the parish to help with the pews, it was finally nice to just stay home, and even the gifts, we didn't have to leave the house to get those because they all came here from Amazon. So everything everything was perfect. We got to stay home the entire day and it was nice. And I think it was probably yesterday after dinner because my 19-year-old son made dinner for everyone. He was like, all right, this is mom's birthday gift. I'm making dinner.
Nice.
They did some pulled barbecue chicken sandwiches. Very good.
Ooh, very good.
Yeah, it was really good. And after dinner, everybody kind of just went and did their own thing like we usually do. And I was going through my church's website because I've been added to the list to be a lector because I finally spoke with the deacon about it. And obviously, as a lector, I'm not going to be giving any homilies. I'm just going to go up there and read scripture. But I was going through the church's website and I saw that there was a link for old homilies.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, cool. And so obviously I haven't missed a single one on a Sunday since May of last year. But the logs go back even prior to that. Now, usually when the homilies are given, if it's a specific priest, if it's Father Smith, he's 9 times out of 10 giving the homily, unless we're having a deacon series about something. Like right now, we've been going through a deacon series of the Apostles' Creed.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they've done is they've taken a section of the Apostles' Creed and then they write a homily around it, basically explaining it, right? Because there's so many people out there that they know the basics of, like, yes, I know the Apostles' Creed. Okay, so why is the Apostles' Creed important? Well, we just know what it says. And so this whole series has been kind of a deeper dive into the theology and the history and everything behind the Apostles' Creed. And Listen, I got to be honest. I love all my deacons. I do. They're awesome people, but some of them have no business giving a homily. And it's it's the same thing with some priests, right? There are some priests out there who they get up there and they go to give a homily and they're just winging it. And you can tell they're winging it. And it kind of makes me think back to when Pope Francis had made the comment about a homily should be 8 minutes long. Otherwise, people will fall asleep. Now, I understand he's a very old Argentinian man. So 8 minutes is a long time to stay awake. Especially if you're listening to someone with zero inflection in their voice. They're kind of reading like when the quiet kid gets called on to read in class and then the dog went over to the house, and it's very monotone, right? Mm-hmm. There's no inflection, there's no energy. Now, my main parish priest, Father Smith, I can listen to that man give a homily for an hour and a half and I would never get bored because he's a phenomenal storyteller. He knows how to, basically he knows how to work the crowd, I guess you could call it, when he's giving a homily. He'll go diving deep into the history of something, and then he'll slip in a little something here that makes people kind of giggle, and then he goes into the deeper, more theological aspects of it, and then he's preaching, and then he closes out and he's like, I had no idea that was 27 minutes long, because he's just that good of a homilist, right? Yeah. The vicar at my parish, Father T, he's 75. And so I like when he gets up and gives a homily, because while he does add inflection into his voice, he'll keep them 5 to 7 minutes and that's it. But they're interesting. Mm-hmm. We've got 3 deacons, and I'm not going to name them on this podcast simply because I don't want the other ones to find out I'm talking about them. But there are 3 deacons that give phenomenal homilies as well. And then there's 4 that don't. And so when I hear Pope Francis talking about, hey, 8 minutes max, the important part of that statement is max. It doesn't mean you have to stretch it to a full 8 minutes. Mm. It's okay if they're shorter. And again, I'm not trying to be mean, but there's nothing wrong with a short and sweet homily that says what it needs to say, and you go sit back down and we move on to the next part of the mass, right? Nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But some of them, they'll get up there and they'll talk for 12, 13, 14 minutes, and I can't stop yawning. And I'm like, I should not be feeling tired in the mass. I'm happy to be here, and then I'm sitting there and it's nice and comfortable temperature, and I can feel that catch in the back of my throat, like there's a yawn coming. And so I'm fighting it. My eyes are watering because I'm trying to fight the homily, fight the yawn during the homily. Mm-hmm. Because where I sit, they can see me. So if they see me going, they're absolutely okay. This guy's being a jerk. I'm like, it's not the case. It's involuntary, I promise. But it got me thinking, what makes a good homily? Because I've heard 20-minute homilies that are awesome. I've heard 3-minute homilies that were awesome. Mm. Then I've heard those that are in the middle that should have been a text. It doesn't need to be a phone call. It should have been a text. It's like a business meeting. You know what? It could have been an email. That's how I feel sometimes. So I don't know. You travel to all these different parishes because you're involved in so many. Yeah. So you get to hear a variety of homilists during Mass. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes you're like, all right, we can speed this up. Go ahead, pass the basket. Speed this up a little. So what is it that makes a good homily, man?
Isn't that the question? if we knew the definitive answer, there would not be a bad homily out there. But
Fair enough.
you know,
but there's still some elements like, okay, what makes a good book? What makes a good movie?
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it's so much the story or the
No.
message itself. I think it's more about the delivery.
Oh, absolutely. It's
got to be in the delivery.
But there are elements that you look for. I mean, because there are certain either priests or deacons that when I see them walking up to the ambo, I just cringe because I know the next 4 or 5 minutes of my life are going to be just miserable. But so there's certain things, because I think the whole like 8-minute thing, I mean, okay, that kind of saves you from really suffering through a bad homilist. But I've, and I think you kind of alluded to this. I've sat through 25-minute homilies that I wished would never end.
Right.
I've sat through 2-minute homilies that I wish never started. So, it really has, and it's interesting to me because I think it's a gift, because I know so many priests and so many deacons that they have classes on this. They're not just winging it the first time they get up there, and so there's certain things. So number one, the person has to be a good homilist. And boy, does that sound like a cop-out statement from my end, but it's true. It's just like, you could have the greatest love for basketball that anyone has ever had, but if you're 5'3" and can't go 3 steps without double dribbling, you're not going to be an NBA star, despite how much you love the game, And I think it's kind of holds true a little bit for anything, and homilies are one of those things. And unfortunately, you're up there in front of the entire congregation, and if you're
like
not
700-800 people at mass, so
exactly right. So you're either a good homilist or you're not,
judging you silently.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I say. Like, there are certain people, when you see them approaching, you don't even know what they're going to talk. Well, you kind of know what they're going to talk about. Presumably, it's going to be about that day's gospel, but you don't know exactly what point they're going to try to highlight or how they're going to try to highlight it. But you're already like cringing because it's just not going to be good. And so I do appreciate a really good homilist. And I'll tell you,
I think Toastmasters should be mandatory for all deacons and priests.
Yeah, I mean, it might help. I don't know. I mean, so I want to see them hold to the truth of the faith, because sometimes there are difficult topics that come up, and some guys will shy away from it. They don't want to be controversial. They're like, oh, what the church teaches on this particular topic is kind of strong. I want to back it up a little bit. I don't want that. I want you to be truthful to me. I want you to tell me what the church says about that. And I don't like, there's some guys, and I get it, because they're attempting to emphasize the message of the day, and perhaps it even helps them to get their thoughts together. But these guys that'll get up there and they'll repeat half of the gospel you just heard. They'll get up there and they'll stand there, and the guy will say, he said in reply, he who sows good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed, the children of the kingdom. And then he'll go on. I just heard that. I don't need to hear it again. I'm falling asleep there in your homily.
It's like a CD in the 90s where one song always ran into the other.
Yeah, right. So that's the thing. So don't repeat the gospel to me. I was paying attention. I was awake. I heard it.
We were standing for it.
We were standing there listening to it. And try to be enthusiastic. Try to make me think that you're excited that you got to preach today. I think about, look at all the letters that Paul wrote, and he's always like, I, a servant of Christ, I, a prisoner for the Lord. He goes on. He's like, he wants you to know, I am so on fire for the faith. And if I don't care if you're a priest or a deacon, and I don't care if you've given 20 homilies that day because it's a small parish and you've got to come back again. I don't care if you've given 100 homilies over the course of the year. Make me feel like that's the first homily you've ever given. you can't believe how incredible the message is for today's gospel. And you can't wait to share that message with me. You know what I mean? Some guys get up there and are like flipping through their notes and, well, today, as Christ was standing on the banks of the river, he's, you know what I mean? No, I'm not, how am I going to enthuse by that? You know? And the other thing is that a lot of these guys don't realize that there are folks out in the congregation that are not experts on first century Palestine. And so,
No,
you
really?
it's true.
What kind of
It's
church do you
true.
go to?
I know, shocking that they're not all theologians out there. But, take that message from today's gospel and put it in terms that the guy who just got off his midnight shift at the Amazon warehouse and dragged his butt over to church, make it meaningful to him. How does this gospel reflection, how does it affect his life? How does it affect how he's going to look at the world when he walks out of the church that day? Don't just explain to me, don't just reread the gospel I just heard. Don't, you know what I mean? Make it make sense to me today. That's why, like, when I do my Bible studies, and like right now we're doing Emmaus journey, which means we just reflect on the upcoming Sunday's gospel readings, readings in general. I start out with every evening with a story. I tell a story, and it's a story that happened within the last 50, 60 years or so. It's because that way they can, but it relates to the gospel message. And so, like, oh well, that's what Christ meant when he said blah blah blah. If you're just going to reiterate, okay, that he's talking about the wheat and the chaff and the this and the that, okay, I just heard that. I don't need to hear that again. What did Jesus mean when he said that? And that's what I want to hear. So keep, it doesn't necessarily have to be brief, but I do prefer it to be brief. Keep it on point. Don't shy away from the hard facts, and make me feel like you are excited that you got that up. I mean, listen, I would kill to be, well, I wouldn't kill because that would be a sin, but I would love to be able to go up in front of my congregation every Sunday and give a homily. I can't for various reasons. Number one, that I'm not a priest or deacon, but I would love that opportunity. And so if I ever got that opportunity, people would know, man, this guy loves Christ. He's excited about this. And so make me feel that. Is that too much to ask? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And I get that too. But, all the things that you were describing, a lot of it really does allude to the delivery of it, like how it's given. Right. It's not the message itself. It's how that message is conveyed, and honestly, I like some of the things when you can tie not just the average man's daily life into the scripture and how it applies, but how scripture can feel relatable to our lives.
Yeah.
Right. And to who we are as just random, flawed people. Right. It's like a good example of this would be if you're talking about dealing with frustration. Let's say, the psalm from the day was talking about, you're feeling like you're not being heard. You're feeling like you're being misunderstood, and that you're starting to get frustrated with the people you're in charge of taking care of. You could turn around and use the story of Christ when he was talking to the disciples about Lazarus, right? So the way that it would be hilarious to tell is you tie that into, when Christ goes to the disciples and he says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to wake him up. And the disciples reply to him and they're like, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll probably get better. And obviously Jesus is talking about death. But his disciples completely misinterpreted what he's saying, and they thought he meant natural sleep. And so finally he just turned around and he's like, bro, Lazarus is dead. It's like, oh, you guys are exhausting. That's not what I mean. He's dead. I gotta go wake him up. It's been 4 days. All right, just come on. And it's stories like that, now that I'm thinking about it, that almost cement the idea to me that the Bible has to be true. So, and I know this is a bit of a segue, but hear me out. It makes me think that obviously the Bible has to be true, because just thinking about Lazarus, you've got Martha, you've got Mary, and you've got Lazarus, right? But then also in these other stories, you've got another Mary, and then another Mary, and then there's another Mary, because look, if you were writing a fiction story, and that story was going to be the foundation of a religion you're trying to start, and you can come up with this incredibly elaborate storyline that in the second half it makes references to the first half, with the old prophecies of the Old Testament tying into the Gospels, and you've got all these fantastical elements to the story, including, well, this guy died and then he came back to life and then he flew away into the sky. You could come up with all these fantastical elements, but you stumble on something as simple as naming characters. Like, we got Mary, we got Mary, we got Mary, we got Mary, and we got Mary. Now, obviously, 3 out of 4 women were named Mary, as it was like the second most popular name in that region of Judea at the time, right? But if you were trying to come up with a fiction story, you wouldn't have so many different people just named Mary or James, right? Well, like, we got James the Greater, we got James the Lesser, so we got James, and then there's another James, and there's this John, and there's that John, and that John. They wouldn't have done that, right? It's the same with all the different Marys. But I'm going to digress a little bit. When I think about, telling a story in a homily, and let's talk about the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings. He's facing off against, I don't know, like 400 and something different prophets of Baal or Baal, or however you say that wanker's name. And he's basically trying to establish and show them who the one true God is. And so what they did is they went up on this mountain, and Elijah and all the other prophets were going to sacrifice a bull for an altar, right? And they built up the altars, and what it was is, okay, whoever's God can ignite the fire on this altar first wins. Like, okay, so it's kind of like, all right, I'll prove it to you. And so, the prophets pretty much dance around and they scream up into the sky, and Elijah kind of stops them, and he's like, you know what? Maybe he just can't hear you. Maybe be a little louder. And he's mocking them, right? He's mocking them. He's like, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Good job. Maybe go tell your God to wake himself up, because, we're running out of daylight here. Come on, guys. And then they're like, well, your God hasn't done it either. He goes, I'll tell you what, you just keep trying, and I'll make it even easier for you. So he goes over to the altar, and he just dumps all this water all over the branches on the altar, right? And he's like, okay, there's no way the fire can be lit, right? At least not by me. But I'll tell you what, my God can still do it. But I'm going to give you guys a little bit more time. And so they screamed and they danced and they wailed at the skies and they beat themselves. And he's like, okay, watch this. And suddenly a fireball from the sky, bam, ignited the wood. But not just the wood. It lit the rocks. It lit the bowl. It lit the water. And he's like, see, told you. So then these 400 prophets of Baal went, oh, yo, okay, I guess we were wrong. Your God's the big G. We got him. All right, we're on board now. The way I just told that story, that made people pay attention. Not, and then Elijah walked up to the mountain and...
Well, that's what I'm saying.
You add inflection, you give it some entertaining story elements. Another good example would be Moses. right? 80-year-old Moses on the top of the mountain again. There's a lot of mountains in the Bible, but obviously, if you've ever gone to the Holy Land, when you hear about these mountains in the Bible, they're pretty much just hills.
The hills, yeah.
They're like hills, right? They're not like they might mimic the Smoky Mountains, but they're nothing like the Rockies,
No.
right? In some places, they might mimic the Smoky Mountains, but Moses, 80 years old, finally gets up to the top, and the first thing God says to him is, "Go back down." and he's like, "Yeah, I just got all the way up here," right? But then a couple of verses later, Moses is like trying to come up with an excuse to avoid the climb, but God doesn't. No, away thee, get down, and thou shalt come up. So what makes me laugh about that is I'm just trying to imagine the look on Moses's face. He's like, see, it's relative. It's funny. Just like when you've got people complain about, it's not a Christian virtue to mock the others. I just told you a story about a prophet mocking prophets, false prophets of Baal, whatever his name was, right?
Yeah.
And then, the story of Moses that I just told, that ties into we don't do things on our time. We have to do things on God's time.
Exactly.
And then, well, you can't be rude to people either. Okay, well, there's one particular story in Galatians where St. Paul told people to go and chop their balls off because they were overly concerned with circumcision. And he was like, if I'm still preaching on circumcision, why am I being persecuted for this? I'm like, if it's that big of a deal, just go and cut them off, fellas. It's a great story, but it's the way that they're delivered that make you want to pay attention.
Exactly.
But when you've got a guy who gets up there and he can't seem to string together the thoughts, and there's a lot of ums and ahs and pauses. Like, this could have been over yesterday. Please. Yeah. Please speed this up a little bit. Please.
Yeah.
So a good one, another good one, when the blind man walks up to Christ and Jesus asks, "What do you want?" Well, what else would he want? A seeing eye dog? A walking stick? Of course he wants to see again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, what's the point of that story? And it's hilarious that I put it that way. But the point is that Christ wants us to share our desires with him. Right? Yeah. It's kind of like when God's walking through the garden and he goes, "Adam, where are you?" Like he doesn't know. But that's a symbol of God respecting our free will and our individuality, and that we come to him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when
that's a whole lot better than me saying it that way.
Yeah.
And then God walked through the garden and asked that. Give us some delivery, give us some oomph, be a storyteller.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when the first two apostles were walking like 40 yards behind Christ after he got baptized, and Christ turned around and said, "What are you looking for?" He knew what they were looking for, Yeah. And he knew that he was just about to change their lives forever. I mean, what an amazing moment that was. And he's just like, "Oh, hey, what do you guys want? What are you doing here? What do you need? What can I help you with?"
Can I help you?
Yeah, can I stop following me?
Do I know you? But there's so many opportunities, and there's funny things that are in the Bible too. Like, if you think about it, I believe it was in the Gospel of Mark, and I could be wrong. You can correct. No, it wasn't the Gospel of Mark. It was the Gospel of John, when the two apostles were racing to the tomb.
Yeah.
He made really sure to make it known that James was not the fastest.
Exactly.
He's like, "I was faster.
I got there quick."
I got there first. I was much faster. I am the bestest runner. It's a very subtle thing, but if you pay attention, he made sure that it was known, but he was much slower. Like, okay, sticking it to your butt over there.
Uh-huh. Good stuff.
But no, it what do we just cover? We got like 5-6 different stories out of the Bible, and
it goes on and on.
They're right, but they're entertaining when you tell them that way.
They can be,
I'm not advocating that people need to be entertained at church. No, that's not the point. But the point is, if you want people to actually absorb the message,
you
got to speak to them in a way that it gets them. Like if you you should be walking out of church, and that your priest is standing there shaking everybody's hand as they come by. You should want to be like, that was a great homily today. And it should be something that you take home and chew on and can't get out of your head for a while because the message was so good. But I've walked out of mass so many times. Well, actually, before they even get to the consecration of gifts, you couldn't hold a gun to my head and Batman couldn't get me to confess what the homily was about.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's an element of confidence that's missing. I think more so with deacons than with priests, although it can happen to priests as well, where they feel like they have to write everything down. They feel like they have to stick to the script of the gospel because they're afraid that if they try to go on their own, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to forget something. The delivery's not going to be there. And so they're very scripted and very monotone. And that's when people start falling asleep. I think you got to remember, you went through how many years of learning this stuff, you practiced and you practiced. You're doing this on a weekly, if not a daily basis. You know this Bible inside and out. You've read the story that you're preaching about. You've read it hundreds of times. Just get up there and talk. Just get up there and let the Holy Spirit carry you through it.
I will also say, though, I'm going to have to stop you there. I will also say there's plenty that I see get up there and they wing it, and they should absolutely be writing stuff down. Like you should absolutely have a script or at least bullet points.
Bullet points. Yeah, that's fine. Just glance down every once in a while. Make sure you're
at the very least. But they get up there like, the gift that God has given me is that I don't have to write my homilies down. And I'm screaming inside, you should write them down. You should write them down. I'm a writer. I will write them down for you.
Yeah. No, you got at least put bullet points. It'd be terrible. You're up there and you give your whole homily. And then you're like, amen. You're walking away. And then you say, oh, did I forget to mention that he rose from the dead at the end of that? Because you didn't look down at your bullet points. You know what I mean? That would be rough.
Important bullet point that's commonly left off of most homilies about the resurrection.
Like, Father, you're leaving me hanging here. Did he make it? Is he okay?
What happened next?
What's going on? Yeah, bullet points will be okay. But I've be all right. I've known a lot of priests and deacons who, man, they know what they're going to be preaching about. They prepare to a very low degree. They really they kind of go over the thoughts in their head a little bit, and then they get up there and, man, they just knock it out of the park. And again, I get it. That's not a talent that everyone has. But for those who do, those are the homilies you really enjoy. A guy that can just get up there and say, hey, here's the gospel message today. Listen to this, devour it, take it home with you, live it, and you'll be all right, as opposed to a guy. I much prefer that to someone who has to read word for word verbatim, because if the guy, he's like staring at his paper the whole time while he's giving a homily, he's so afraid to deviate that he doesn't even look up to look at the congregation. You gotta make that connection with the folks out there. You know what I mean? So there's somewhere in between. So yeah, throw your bullet points down there, glance down every now and then, make sure you didn't miss bullet points 3 and 7 or whatever, and then go from there. But you get up there.
It is a skill. I've done a lot of public speaking. It's a skill you have to hone. And I would think that because a lot of these deacons that are, even priests that are bad homilists, some of them have been giving homilies 5, 6, 7 times a week for the last 30, 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
and they still haven't gotten good at it.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah.
But then, of course, you think about when someone's giving a homily. I've been a public speaker at several different conferences, several different events, and when you have something like written down, you've got notes that are over there on the podium, and you're wired up with your lapel mic, and you're
Yeah.
walking from this side of the stage to that side of the stage, and then you pause and lean on the podium, glance down while you're talking, and kind of skim what's coming next, and then you look back up at the audience. That's a skill, because I've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
people that'll be reading, and then as soon as they look up to continue speaking, they're on point, but then they look back down and they've got no idea where they were, and so they
Yeah.
pause, and they gotta oh, and then the Apostle Paul, they lost their place, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely a skill,
Yes.
but man, they make bad homilies seem so effortless sometimes.
Yeah.
I know it sounds
Yeah.
weird,
No, it's
but
true.
everyone listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. They've got one deacon or one priest or maybe a handful that when they go up there, they're just like you. They go, "Here we go." Like, here we go. And they start reading the bulletin during the homily.
Yeah.
Stay awake.
Yeah. You got to just get up there and say, "Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will proclaim your glory," and then go from there. Let the Holy Spirit take you from there.
Yeah, sure. But at the same time, when God answers your prayers, they're not always the answers you want. He's like, "No, son, you're not good at this. I want you to experience humility now."
Well, yeah.
I'm going to humble you before your congregation.
Yeah. Yeah. Every church, it'd be great if every church had a guy like that Father Mark Beard who passed away last year.
Yeah. He was so charismatic.
Oh, man.
He died in a car crash, didn't he?
He certainly did.
That's what I thought.
There's certain homilies of his, and thank goodness that somebody had the foresight to tape his homilies, because I'll go to YouTube and I'll just watch 3 or 4 of them at a time. I'll watch ones that I've seen 3 or 4 times, because he rattled you right to your core.
It's the same way with Father Larry Richards.
Father Larry Richards, same thing. Yeah.
Like, oh man, I remember one of his distinctly because it was hilarious. He was talking about confession, and actually was in the conference. It was in the men's conference, and he was talking about how, some people, they're very like, you have to confess the dirtiest little secret, the dirtiest little sin, and what's one of the 2 most common sins with men? Lust. One of the most common. Everybody feels lustful feelings. But he had this one priest that he worked with who was very uncomfortable with the word masturbation. And the priest was just super uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, okay, you know what? He even said it in a homily. If that's what you're going to confess to, just say, "I loved my country." And I'll know what you mean. Well, that became like the normal thing at this parish, right? Well, then that priest retired. Now the parishioners didn't retire from being parishioners, but they got a new priest.
Yeah.
And after like the 3rd or 4th week of taking everyone's confession, he was up there giving a homily, and he's like, I didn't realize we had such a patriotic congregation. It's like, oh no,
That's good stuff.
It's so good, right? He's like, but the point is, you have to even the sins that make you uncomfortable, that you feel embarrassed about. Look,
Yeah.
most priests have, when they hear confession, if they have an active parish, they're hearing upwards of 100 or more confessions every single week.
Yeah.
Unless you have a very distinctive, like Gilbert Gottfried or Pee Wee Herman voice, he's not gonna know who you
No,
are.
he's not.
Get it off your chest, get it off your soul, and come back into a state of grace.
Yeah.
Now, if you get up there and you sound like Marge Simpson, okay, listen, I suggest you stop whatever embarrassing sins, because he's going to know it's you, right? You sound like Gilbert Gottfried in there trying to give confession. Everyone can hear you. Okay, but chances are, one, he's already heard that like 4 people confess to it this week or
Sure.
this day. And for second, he's not going to recognize your voice, especially if it's an active parish. I try to go to confession once every 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And so I go in there, and confession's supposed to start at 3:30, last till 5 on Saturdays. And okay, so I go in there. We've got the confessional here, we've got the confessional over here, and there's usually lines on each with 2 different priests. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to get there like 10 minutes before confession starts, so I don't have to wait in so long of a line.
Mm.
I go in there, I'm like number 45 in the line. And I'm like, oh. And I look over at the second line, and it's just as long. Like, so there's no way he remembers everybody's voice. And he's not going to be like, oh, yeah, I remember what you told me. He can't see you. It's a confessional. He's not even looking at you. And I know there's some where they've just got the little screen and the little chair, and it's like a face-to-face kind of thing.
Mm.
But even then, he's facing this way, and he's not looking over at you. I have seen the face-to-face confessionals before, but we don't have those at my parish. At mine, we have a confessional room that you can walk into, and the priest is sitting there in his chair, and there's like this big old huge divider. It looks like a giant tapestry hanging down, and it's even got like the act of contrition like stuck to it in case you don't know it. And he can't see you through that.
Yeah.
And you give your confession. And then on the other side, we've got, there's a chair for the priest to sit in, and then there's a screen that looks very traditional, like what you would see in the old school, like St. Pat's Cathedral confessional booths, right? With that, looks like a wicker lattice kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's a chair there where you face the priest, but he's facing this way, and he can't see through it. So unless he leans forward, or leans back there and be like, is that you, Jim? But either way, you want to get it off your chest anyway.
Of course.
But the way that Father Larry Richards told that entire story is something that I've never forgotten. I first heard it years ago.
Yeah. I think the concern would be if the parish he was describing was a very small parish, and after the first couple of times the priest heard it and didn't realize what was going on, and that Sunday he was pointing at the audience and he said, "Jim, you've got to be the most patriotic guy I've ever met in my life."
Oh, that would be terrible.
That would be rough.
I'll tell you what, everyone, Jim really loves his country. You just want to crawl backwards out of mass. Look, I'm done. That's absolutely terrible. But yeah. It's all about the storytelling, and it's about making people feel like they can relate to the story and connect with it. Because look, every single story in the Bible relates to because it's not like life changed all of that much, because humanity hasn't really changed. So everything you read in Scripture, whether it's Old Testament or New Testament, except maybe Leviticus, okay? That one's a hard one to get through.
Yes, it is.
But the stories and the lessons from those stories are timeless.
Yeah.
That's why the Bible's the #1 bestseller of all time. And it's most of the time free.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you can make me feel like, okay, this actually connects to something me in 2024 am dealing with, and make me feel like, oh, now I get it, because I'm not that smart. I appreciate it when you say things in crayon, but also make me, engage with it. It's so much better.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we should send because we you and I both collectively have a lot of clout with the Vatican. We could
Certainly.
we could get Francis to issue a papal bull requiring storytelling classes and Toastmasters for all homilists.
We could do that. We could
We
do
could
that, and I'm
try
sure it
that.
would be taken very seriously. Yes, coming
I'm
from us,
certain we would.
how could they ignore it?
Yeah, we're like the bee's knees in Vatican City, bro.
We really are.
Yeah, the Pope's got a picture of us on his desk. We're his favorite show to listen to.
It reminds me of back when I was in elementary school and my brother was in 8th grade. So this would have been probably somewhere around 1975 or so. So there's no cell phones, there's no this, there's no that, there's none of it. There weren't even fax machines, I assume, at that point. And a kid who was a troublemaker in my brother's class sent a telegram to the Pope. He sent a telegram to the Vatican, signed it with my brother's name, and said, "Your Holiness, I'm sorry to inform you that I will not be able to make the conclave this week." And he signed it. So our Monsignor got a call from the diocesan offices and wanted to know why this young man, my brother, was sending strange telegrams to the Pope. So yeah, so my family does have an in over there.
Well, and listen, at least we know it got to the Vatican.
It got there, yeah, which is pretty crazy about it. But maybe
It's like, who is this kid?
Regret to inform you. Oh boy.
Regret to inform you that I won't make it to the conclave. He's like,
yeah.
What is going on here?
We were so desperate to hear what that 13-year-old had to say.
Oh, we're gonna have to change all the plans now.
Exactly. We'll postpone until you can make it.
Oh, that's amazing.
Good stuff.
Can you even still send telegrams? Is that a thing that still?
I think you can. I don't know. Maybe not. But it wouldn't be sent the same way. They wouldn't be sent through telegraph wires. But I think there's probably but I think there's something that's equivalent. I don't know. What was that company? That
was Western Union.
Western Union. They still exist. I don't know what they do.
I'm like, Western Union's still a thing. I think most of it's like for wiring money.
It's for wiring money, but if you can wire money,
which is weird because you can just like Cash App someone or Zelle.
Oh, I know. So I don't know why people still need that, but then if they,
can I use Western Union a lot if like for example to get the tickets to the 12th Marian Eucharistic Conference this year, they require a check. You can't pay online. So I'm like, I'll go to Western Union. I'll get a money order and pay it to the order of. But that's about the only. But you can do that at the post office too. So I don't know what Western Union is there for.
I don't know. Could be a money laundering scheme.
I suppose some people still don't have Zelle or Venmo.
I guess.
I don't know. That's weird. I haven't thought about that in years. But
I gotta look that up. When we're done here, I gotta look that up. What does Western Union
do anymore?
And do they still use carriages and horses? I want to know.
That I'm pretty sure they don't.
They don't.
I can save you a Google search. I'm pretty sure they don't.
Just wondering.
Yeah. Like I don't know what they do anymore aside from giving me a money order every 5 years.
I can walk into 7-Eleven or Stuckey's or whoever and get a money order.
The post office.
Anywhere. I mean, every grocery store you can get them.
But when I go through the grocery store, it comes on a Western Union letterhead.
Oh, it does.
Type Western Union.
All right,
Yeah,
so they
it
are
says
still
Western
involved.
Union on the money order.
So they're the middleman still. They're making money that way. They're
Yeah,
they're getting their
maybe.
cut.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. We just explained exactly how old we were.
Hey, my mail used to come by Pony Express when I was a kid. So if that
I'm
helps you.
sure it did. I'm sure it did.
Well, we did have a milkman now. We did have a milkman.
Yeah, okay. Listen, I was fortunate enough to live in one of those areas that
Yeah.
still had milk deliveries.
Yeah.
And well, not even just milk, it was actually full-blown grocery deliveries.
Oh, okay.
Like you could call the grocery store, they would put it on your tab,
Yeah.
and some kid would
Some
like
kid on a bike.
bring it to you in his little Honda or
Yeah.
whatever. Right. It was obviously pre-DoorDash, pre-Grubhub,
Oh,
Uber
yeah.
Eats, all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they still did that. And there's actually a grocery store in my wife's hometown that to this day you can still run a tab.
Oh. That's
It's
cool.
obviously a family-owned joint,
Oh, sure.
right? But they've been there for like, I don't know, 40, 50 years. So it's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
That's nice.
Oh, but all right, Ed, what you got for us today, man?
I got something cool. There's been a couple of things that I brought in that were related to uh, Catholic societies that some are not all, or some or all of us didn't even know existed, or that they still existed. Like that purgatorial society that we talked about a few weeks ago, and there's a couple other ones I
Right.
think too. So this is really cool because this is kind of old, and but some people still use these and wear these. But this is a medal from the Nocturnal Adoration Society. And so someone who was involved while they were adoring at like a 40 hours of adoration or something like that, they would wear this. And I'm thinking of starting to wear it when I go to adoration because it's really cool. But the Nocturnal Adoration Society was developed from the practice of night adoration of the Blessed Sacrament during the 40 hours devotion. At the time when the church was threatened by widespread heresy in the nations of Europe and by invading hostile Muslim forces in the East, Pope Clement VIII in 1592 instituted the 40 hours devotion in the city of Rome in order to offer incessant prayer to the Lord, imploring his help and his grace for the protection of his people menaced by such grave danger. And 2 centuries later, in 1809, another crisis threatened the church. In the aftermath of the French Revolution and the political and religious upheaval in Europe, Napoleon had risen to power and had made Pope Pius VIII his prisoner. A priest in the city of Rome, Father Giacomo Sinibaldi, was inspired to gather together groups of men to pray in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament during the night hours in the church in Rome, where the 40 hours devotion was in progress. The response to his idea was so enthusiastic that in a short time there were groups meeting for prayer every night of the year in the churches where the Blessed Sacrament was exposed. Ecclesiastical approval was given to these adorers, and in 1810, the Nocturnal Adoration Society came into existence. So it's been around since 1810. Its center was the Church of Santa Maria in Vialata in Rome. In 1851, the society was approved as a pious union, and in 1858, it was raised to the status of archconfraternity, with authority to establish nocturnal adoration societies elsewhere. So the history goes on and on and on, but just to let you know that today it's worldwide. They're in Mexico, they're in Canada, they're here in the U.S. I believe in the U.S. the headquarters is in a parish in Texas somewhere. I believe I can look that up, but they're all over the place. And if you were a member of the society, I guess you would be given one of these pins, which you would wear during adoration. So they're kind of cool. So the Nocturnal Adoration Society started in 1810 and going strong in 2024. What do you think?
Well, I honestly feel shortchanged a little bit
And why is that?
because I am a member of the St. Thomas Aquinas Guild of Adoration.
Oh, cool.
And I didn't get no stinking medal.
You didn't get a medal. All right, I'll mail you this one.
Like,
you got to talk to somebody down there. Did you pay your dues this year?
Yeah, I paid them. And what makes
Did
it
you?
even worse is I go 8 o'clock at night, so it's also nocturnal. Come on, man.
Listen, I love nighttime adoration. The later, the better. Unfortunately, I'm blessed that there are a few churches in my area here that have perpetual adoration, and one of them I love to go to. It's at a church called St. Raphael's, and they have a school there, and they used to be taught by nuns. The nuns aren't there anymore, so they turned the nuns' home, the convent, into offices, but they kept the nuns' chapel, which is beautiful, beautiful little chapel, and that's the perpetual adoration chapel. It's 24/7. You can walk in there and pray, and I've been there to every hour of the day and night. I can tell you that. In the church that I do most of my stuff at, they don't have that, which is unfortunate. They have adoration on Wednesdays from, I guess, 7 in the morning till 7 at night. But they will, a couple times a year, they'll have 40 hours of adoration. Now, it's kind of embarrassing because it's a huge church. There's 6,500 families at this place. And when they'll do 48 hours of adoration, they can't fill every time slot to have people sign up and stay with our Lord. It blows my mind. Many times I have been called upon to be there from 9 o'clock at night until 8 or 9 o'clock the next morning. And I have very willingly and happily done that. And you'd be shocked. You'd think by midnight I'd be passed out in a pew. But being in the presence of our Lord by myself for 12 to 13 hours has been some of the most incredible experiences of my life. Just that silence and just staring at the monstrance and going through my prayers and things. And hey, you might say it was because I was overly exhausted or something like that. I don't believe that's the case. But one time I was there, and every hour or so I would go up and I would kneel in front of the monstrance for a bit. And at one point it was probably 3 in the morning, and I went up there and I knelt and I was praying, and I bowed my head down. And when I looked back up, I saw the face of Christ in the host in the monstrance. It startled me, and I'm staring at it because I'm thinking, okay, you're tired, you're exhausted, you're seeing things, and I just kept looking and looking. It didn't fade away, and then I went back to my pew, and I just stayed there for the remainder of my time there. And I can assure you, I was wide awake then. I was wide awake when I left a few hours later. But just such an incredible. I just look at it. It was a gift from our Lord for spending that time with Him. So adoration is something I will always support, something I will always participate in, and just one of the many beautiful, beautiful parts of being a Catholic, I would say.
Absolutely. It's probably my favorite part of the week outside of going to Mass.
Yeah.
But no, I feel like Joey Zaza talking to Michael Corleone in The Godfather 3. Why don't I get a little pin from the Pope?
I'm talking to the Pope later today. I'll see if I can get you one of those pins.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're pretty tight. Me and Frankie were pretty tight. I could probably score.
Frankie. Yeah. Only his innermost circle call him Frankie.
Oh, it's like me and 3 Cardinals that call him that. Maybe.
Excellent. So stupid. All right. So, all right. Well, I guess we're about out of time. So I'll go ahead and remind everyone that I personally and wholeheartedly thank you for liking, for watching, for listening, for sharing, for subscribing. But most of all, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for getting the content of this episode in front of as many anti-Catholic people as you possibly can. Mainly because I like trolling the haters.
There you go.
But no, seriously. Thanks for all you guys who listen, watch, subscribe, like, and share. But we're out of here, and we'll see you tomorrow.
God bless you, everybody.